going to talk about project risk management on the practical side. First of all, I want to talk about a couple of things you do not want to do while you are identifying risks on your project. And these are things that you need to really pay attention to. The first thing that I want to talk about is a problem many project managers face. When they try to identify risks, they start by identifying what we call generic risks. What do I mean by generic? Let me give you an example. Think of any project that you're working on. I can tell you right now what are the risks on that project. Ready? The risks are the project might end up being late, the project might end up being over budget, the project might end up doing the wrong scope, you might end up with customer dissatisfaction. All of these, I guessed right, I know, because at the end of the day, all of these are generic risks that apply to anything. This is not what you want in your risk register, in your risk log. You want to be specific. How do we fix this problem? Take any of these generic risks when you say, I'm worried about, or my project might end up being late, and ask yourself, what are the things that might lead to the project being late? And then you will start talking about specific risks. For example, you know that some of the suppliers are known to be late. Then you might say, okay, delays by the supplier, by the so-and-so supplier, specifically by name. If you are thinking about, for example, something that will delay you, certain approvals from governmental agencies might delay you, then you put that in. And this is how you put specific risks that are relevant to your project. So this is the first point. The second point that project managers make a mistake with when they identify risks is listing risks just, I call it the just because syndrome. We list risks just because they could happen. This is not something you want to do again. Give you an example. Once in front of a CEO, a project manager sat down and started going over the major risks that he sees on his project. And one of them was employee turnover, losing some of the key employees or the key project team members during the project. And the CEO got really worried, and he stopped him and he said, do you know something about this project that I do not know? And the answer from the project manager was no. He said, is there something you want to tell me? The executive asked, and the project manager said no. He says, then why are you listing this risk? Is there someone you know who's going to leave? Have you heard that some people are leaving? He said, no, I'm listing them just because they could happen. Never list things just because they could happen. If you have prior information, for example, about such problems happening on the project with key team members leaving, fine, put that in. But do not list it just because it could happen. You will end up cluttering your risk log with things that are not relevant and your executives would not care about. So we want this out of the way. Do not list risks just because. So how do I identify risks? Identifying risks is a little bit more difficult than what books and theory try to convince us it is. One of the reasons is the culture. Sometimes people are not comfortable sharing risks with you. And there are many reasons for that. We're not going to get into that. So how do I help people identify risks? One of the things you can do, get your team members together and ask them to do this exercise. We will call it questions we have. So we will ask team members to list questions, or stakeholders to list questions they have about the project that are still not clear to them. Every question that they have in their mind is an uncertainty, and probably it will lead you to a risk. For example, one of the questions that a team member might have, how are we going to identify the right components for this project? That means the right components have not been identified until now, and this is an uncertainty. And if we do not do it properly, it might lead us to problems. So this can be a risk condition that you have to be aware of. So questions we have is a good technique. There's another technique I wanted to mention, is to ask team members in a positive way, put a positive spin on it. Ask them, what do you think we can do to improve our chances of success on this project? People will be more open to share things to improve than to share risks. So they'll start saying, if we, for example, write the scope clearer, if we, for example, get more skilled team members, if we get, they start telling you things that actually are the reverse of the risks. And this will lead you also to risks. So this is another technique. Another way you can do it is to ask people whether they have any concerns on the project. However, remember, if you do not have an open communication culture on your team and in the organization you are working with, it's going to be very hard for people to talk openly about their concerns. One final thing I wanted to mention before we wrap this up is always remember to list positive risks as well as negative risks, but keep them in separate logs. What do I mean by positive risks? I'm talking about opportunities. Ask your team to help you to identify opportunities on this project that will help you make a bigger success, better success, excel, make it as we can say an excellent project versus a mediocre or a good project. Thank you for listening.